He yanked off my prayer cap and held it up for the crowd like a trophy. Then came the glass room, the open door, the audience he wanted watching. He ripped my Quran page by page. They floated down like snow while his colleagues clapped. He found my family photo. He tapped my daughter's faces. He said something about them I'll never repeat. Then he slid that photo into his pocket and made sure I watched him memorize my address. The crowd outside the glass nodded along. Then the airport director walked in, said my name, said my title. The agent's knees buckled so fast he cracked them on the floor. The photo fluttered from his pocket. 3 buttons popped off his collar because he couldn't breathe. The marshals found him curled in the corner. The same crowd watched him get dragged out. Let me tell you what happened from the beginning. I arrived 3 hours early that morning, parked my car in the long-term lot and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. Full beard, trimmed but thick. Prayer cap sitting square on my head. Traditional clothing that marked me as visibly Muslim. Everything about my appearance was designed to trigger their system, to test whether this airport was doing exactly what 300 complaints said they were doing. The body camera in my jacket button was already recording. Standard equipment for Inspector General compliance audits. Nobody knew I was coming. That was the point. The director leans forward in his chair, his face tight. I can see him processing what I'm telling him, understanding that this wasn't some random screening gone wrong. This was a federal investigation, and his facility just failed spectacularly. I continue explaining how I watched the security checkpoint from a distance first, documenting patterns. 3 bearded men got pulled aside within 20 minutes. Each one got the full treatment while families and business people walked through with barely a glance. The contrast was impossible to miss. White travelers breezed past with their laptops and water bottles. Brown men with beards got surrounded by agents. My camera caught all of it. The timestamps would prove the systematic nature of what was happening here. The director's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. I tell him about approaching the checkpoint myself, watching the agent spot me from 30 feet away. His posture changed instantly. He started calling for backup before I even joined the line. His voice carried across the terminal, loud enough that other travelers turned to stare. He was treating me like a confirmed threat, not a passenger requiring routine security. Standard protocol says agents should remain neutral until screening reveals actual concerns. This agent decided I was dangerous the moment he saw my prayer cap. The director's face goes darker as I describe what happened next. The agent didn't just remove my prayer cap during screening. He yanked it off my head and held it up for the crowd like he'd captured enemy equipment. Made a show of it. I watched a businessman in line give him a thumbs up. Other agents stopped managing their own lanes and gathered to watch. This wasn't security screening anymore. This was performance. Public humiliation designed to send a message to everyone watching about what happens to people who look like me. The deliberate spectacle of it, the way he played to his audience. The director's jaw clenches. I detail the hand swabbing next. 3 separate swabs, each one harder than the last. The agent pressed down until my palms burned red. He announced to everyone within earshot that he was checking for bomb residue, made sure every word carried to the crowd. Standard protocol is 1 swab unless the first shows positive results. Mine didn't. The machine stayed green after the first test. He swabbed me twice more anyway, each time louder about what he was checking for, each time making sure the crowd understood he suspected me of terrorism. The director's hands have gone white on the armrests. Then came the glass room, I tell him. The agent chose that screening room specifically because the walls are transparent, and he left the door wide open. He positioned me facing outward so everyone in the terminal could watch. The crowd pressed closer. He wanted an audience for what came next. This wasn't about security anymore. This was about making an example of me in the most public way possible. About showing everyone watching what happens when you're Muslim in his checkpoint. The director starts to speak, but I keep going because he needs to hear all of it. I describe the mocking of my prayer bruise, the mark on my forehead from regular prostration during prayer. The agent made me turn in circles while his colleagues whistled and called out comments. Then he slammed me face first against the wall, hard enough that I tasted blood. The impact rattled my teeth. The crowd outside watched it happen. Nobody intervened. Nobody questioned whether this level of force was necessary for a compliance screening. The director's hands are shaking now. I tell him about the zip ties next. They cut off circulation to my fingers within minutes. I watched my hands turn purple while the agent dumped out my prayer bag with deliberate slowness. He made a show of each sacred item, held up my prayer rug, examined my Quran page by page like he was searching for hidden messages. Every movement calculated for maximum humiliation. Every gesture designed to degrade not just me, but everything I carried that marked me as Muslim. The restraints violated every protocol in the TSA handbook. You don't zip tie someone unless they're actively resisting. I never resisted. I stood there and let him violate every regulation because I was documenting everything. Because 300 complaints needed proof. My voice stays level as I describe watching him grind his boots into my prayer rug. The director sees my jaw tighten when I mention the Quran pages floating down like snow. The agent ripped it page by page, let each one flutter to the floor. His colleagues clapped. Actually clapped at the destruction of a holy book. The businessman from the line nodded his approval. The crowd outside the glass stayed silent, but nobody left. Nobody reported what they were witnessing. They just watched religious desecration happen in a federal facility and did nothing. The director looks sick. I explain the final items. My mother's prayer beads smashed against the wall. Prayer oil poured over my head until it ran down my face and soaked my shirt. The heart medication my mother needs twice daily stomped flat under his boot. Each action was calculated cruelty. Each one designed to degrade not just me, but everything I represent to him. Everything about my faith, my family, my identity. He wanted to break me in front of that crowd. Wanted them to see a Muslim man humiliated and powerless. That's what this was really about. The director's face goes pale when I reach the part about the family photo. I watch his hands grip the armrests harder when I describe how the agent tapped my daughter's faces through the plastic. How his voice changed from performing for the crowd to something that made my stomach turn. The way he held the photo up and read our address out loud like he was memorizing it for later. Then he slid it into his pocket. Made sure I saw him do it. Made sure I knew what he was promising. The director's knuckles go white. I tell him about the specific words the agent used about my wife and daughters. Words I won't repeat to anyone else, but that this man needs to hear because he runs this facility, and he needs to understand what happened here. The director looks like he might be sick. He starts to apologize, but I keep talking because he needs to hear all of it before he tries to make it better with words. That's when everything changed for me. I stayed calm through the prayer cap being waved around. I stayed professional when he ripped my Quran. I documented everything when he poured oil on my head and smashed my mother's medication. But threatening my children crossed a line that made my hands shake even now. The director sees my hands trembling on the table between us. He nods slowly like he understands that some violations cut deeper than others. That this stopped being just a compliance audit the moment that photo went into the agent's pocket. That this became personal in ways the audit protocol never prepared me for. I'm a federal investigator trained to stay detached. I've documented discrimination for 8 years without letting it get to me. But I'm also a father. And that agent knew exactly what he was doing when he threatened my family. The door opens and a woman in a federal marshal uniform walks in. The director stands up fast. Marshal Yemi Harrington introduces herself and asks if I'm ready to give a formal statement. I nod. She doesn't react to the oil still matting my hair, or the purple marks on my wrists where the zip ties cut off blood flow. She just pulls out a camera and starts taking pictures. My wrists from different angles. The oil stains on my shirt. The red marks on my palms from the aggressive swabbing. She photographs everything while I repeat the whole sequence of events again. Her camera clicks steadily as I talk. She asks specific questions about timing and exact words used. Her notebook fills with details that will support criminal charges beyond just getting the agent fired. She photographs the screening room through the glass walls. The scattered Quran pages still on the floor. The broken prayer beads. My stomped prayer rug. She bags everything as evidence and seals each bag with official tape and labels. The director tells Harrington he's securing the screening room as a crime scene. Then he turns to me and offers his private bathroom so I can shower. Harrington nods her approval. The director leads me through his office to a small bathroom with clean towels and soap. He leaves me alone and closes the door. I stand under hot water for a long time. The prayer oil finally washes out of my hair and runs down the drain. My wrists ache where the zip ties cut in. The spot on my forehead where he mocked my prayer bruise is tender. I watch the water circle the drain and feel everything I've been holding back start to crack. I stayed professional through the whole incident because that's what the job required. But now I'm alone and safe and my hands won't stop shaking. I sit down in the shower and let the water run over me. My daughter's faces keep appearing in my mind. The way the agent tapped their photos. The specific threats he made. I stayed calm for the investigation, but now I'm terrified for my family. I dry off and put my oil-stained clothes back on because I don't have anything else. The director is waiting in his office when I come out. He tells me I missed my original flight. He's already on his computer booking me on the next available departure. First class. He prints out a new boarding pass and hands it to me. He says I'll bypass all security screening. His assistant will escort me directly to the gate. The gesture feels empty after what I just went through, but I recognize he's trying to show accountability within whatever authority he has right now. He can't undo what happened. He can't erase the threats against my family, but he's doing what he can in this moment. I take the boarding pass. He walks me to the terminal himself. People stare at my stained clothes and damp hair. He doesn't leave until I'm through the gate area and sitting at my departure gate. On the plane, I pull out my laptop. The passenger next to me is reading a magazine. I open a new document and start writing my preliminary report for the Inspector General's office. Every violation gets documented with exact timestamps from my body camera footage. The initial profiling at 8:47 a.m., the excessive hand swabbing at 9:03 a.m., the zip tie restraints at 9:15 a.m., the religious desecration from 9:18 a.m. to 9:31 a.m., the family photo incident at 9:35 a.m., the director's intervention at 9:42 a.m. I type for 2 hours straight. The passenger keeps glancing at my wrists where the zip tie marks are still visible and purple. She doesn't ask questions. I'm grateful for that because I'm not ready to explain any of this to a stranger. The flight attendant offers me drinks twice. I just want water. My throat is dry from talking through the incident multiple times. The report reaches 15 pages before I'm done with the preliminary version. I'll add more detail later. Right now, I just need the facts documented while everything is fresh. I get home after midnight. Aaliyah is awake on the couch. She stands up when I walk in. Her face crumples when she sees me. The bruises on my face. The way I'm moving carefully because my ribs hurt. The purple marks on my wrists. She hugs me gently like she's afraid I'll break. I tell her everything. The profiling. The screening room. The Quran destruction. The prayer oil. The restraints. Everything except the specific threats about our daughters. I can't tell her that part yet. Not until I know what kind of protection the Inspector General's office will provide. Not until I know if we need to worry about the agent knowing our address. She cries while I talk. She keeps touching my face gently and looking at my wrists. She asks if I'm okay. I tell her I will be. I don't know if that's true, but it's what she needs to hear right now. The next morning, my daughters notice the marks on my wrists during breakfast. Safia asks what happened to my arms. I tell them I had a difficult work assignment. I keep my voice light. Normal. Like nothing major happened. But Safia studies my face with too much understanding for a 12-year-old. She's experienced Islamophobia at the school. Kids making comments about her headscarf. Teachers assuming she doesn't speak English well even though she was born here. She knows what discrimination looks like. She doesn't ask more questions, but I see in her eyes that she knows this was about more than just a difficult assignment. Her younger sister goes back to eating cereal. But Safia watches me carefully for the rest of breakfast. My phone rings. Inspector Antoinette Maynard from the IG office. I step into the hallway. Her voice is tight with anger when she speaks. She's been reviewing my body camera footage since I uploaded it last night. She tells me this is the most serious case of religious discrimination she's documented in 15 years with the Inspector General. The footage is clear. The violations are extreme. She's fast-tracking the investigation with full federal resources. Legal team. Evidence analysis. Witness interviews. Everything. She asks how I'm doing. I tell her I'm managing. She says the office will provide any support I need. Counseling. Legal assistance. Protection services if necessary. I ask about protection. She says we'll discuss that when I come in tomorrow. Maynard tells me the agent was terminated within hours of the incident. The airport director fired him immediately. But termination is just the beginning of what he'll face. Federal prosecutors are reviewing my footage right now. They're evaluating charges. Civil rights violations under color of law. Assault on a federal officer. Theft of federal evidence. Threatening a federal officer and his family. Each charge carries serious prison time. She says the evidence is overwhelming. The body camera captured everything. The audio is clear. The timestamps prove the sequence. Multiple witnesses saw the public harassment. The destroyed religious items are in evidence bags. My injuries are documented. This isn't a case that requires building evidence. This is a case where the evidence builds itself. She sounds satisfied. Almost fierce. Like she's been waiting for a case this clear-cut to prosecute someone this thoroughly. I thank her. She tells me to rest today. Come to the office tomorrow. We'll plan next steps then. I arrive at the Inspector General's office the next morning. Maynard already has files spread across the conference table. She points to 3 folders with agent names I recognize from the glass room, the ones who clapped while pages of my Quran floated to the floor. She tells me they're being placed on immediate administrative leave. Her voice is sharp when she explains their complicity in religious destruction makes them liable for action, even though they didn't touch my belongings directly. The investigation will determine if they keep their jobs or face termination. I watch her make calls to their supervisors. Each conversation is brief and professional. She uses words like unacceptable conduct and violation of civil rights standards. The agents will be escorted from the building within the hour. I feel something shift in my chest when she hangs up. These people cheered while my holy book was destroyed. Now they're losing their jobs. Maynard opens another file. Supervisor Camilo Rutledge. She shows me security footage from a different angle. Rutledge walks past the glass room during the early part of my screening. He looks through the window. He sees the agent pulling off my prayer cap. He sees the crowd gathering. Then he turns and walks away. Maynard taps the screen. She says his negligence allowed the harassment to grow worse. He had authority to intervene. He chose to ignore what was happening. The investigation shows he witnessed the beginning and did nothing. That failure of supervisory responsibility enabled everything that came after. He's suspended pending full review, probably fired within the week. I spend the next 2 days at home writing my comprehensive report. My laptop sits on the kitchen table. Aaliyah brings me coffee and doesn't ask questions when I wave her away. I document everything starting from when I arrived at the airport. The 3 bearded men pulled aside before I reached security. Each one subjected to extra screening while white travelers moved through quickly. I describe their faces, their resignation, the way they accepted the treatment like they expected it. I include timestamps from my body camera for each profiling incident. The pattern evidence fills 12 pages before I even reach my own screening. This wasn't one bad agent having a terrible day. This was systematic discrimination with institutional roots. Multiple agents participating. Supervisors ignoring complaints. A culture that treated Muslim travelers as threats by default. My report connects the dots between individual incidents and broader policy failures. I send it to Maynard late on the second night. She calls me 20 minutes later. She sounds energized, almost excited. She tells me the pattern evidence transforms this from isolated misconduct to systemic civil rights violations. The airport's entire security operation is now under federal review. Maynard assigns a team to interview witnesses from the crowd. They start with the businessman who gave the thumbs up during the Quran destruction. He provides a statement confirming he watched the whole incident through the glass walls. He describes the agent holding up torn pages, the colleagues clapping, my face pressed against the wall. His statement includes details about the deliberate performance aspect, how the agent kept glancing at the crowd to make sure people were watching, how he positioned me facing outward so everyone could see my humiliation. Other travelers come forward with similar accounts. A woman with 2 children, an elderly couple, a college student. Each one describes the public nature of what happened, the agent's obvious enjoyment of the audience, the way he made sure his actions were visible to as many people as possible. Their statements support charges of intentional civil rights violations, not just discrimination, but calculated harassment designed to humiliate. The airport director calls 3 days after the incident. His voice is formal but urgent. He tells me he's implementing immediate policy changes, mandatory bias training for all TSA agents starting next week, body cameras for every screener to document their interactions, a direct reporting system for discrimination complaints that bypasses supervisors and goes straight to federal oversight. He reads from a prepared statement. Each reform sounds comprehensive and necessary. I listen without interrupting. When he finishes, I thank him for the swift action. But I can't help wondering if any of these changes would exist without my federal authority forcing accountability. Would he care this much if I was just a regular Muslim traveler with no power to investigate? Would the agent still have his job if I couldn't document everything with body camera footage? The director seems to hear my unspoken questions. He tells me the reforms should have happened years ago. He admits the airport failed hundreds of Muslim travelers before me. My case just made the failures impossible to ignore anymore. I appreciate his honesty even though it doesn't erase what happened. Federal prosecutor Hadrian Burnett contacts me the following week. His voice is confident and direct. He explains they're building a criminal case against the agent. Deprivation of rights under color of law. That's the main charge. It carries serious federal penalties because the agent used his official position to violate my constitutional protections. He abused government authority to target me for my religion. Burnett walks me through the evidence. My body camera footage shows everything clearly. The audio captures exact words and timing. The destroyed religious items are in evidence bags with chain of custody documentation. Multiple witnesses confirm the public harassment. My injuries are photographed and medically documented. He sounds satisfied when he tells me this is one of the strongest civil rights cases he's prosecuted. The evidence builds itself. Then Burnett asks about the family photo incident. He wants to know if I'll pursue charges related to the threats against my daughters. Witness intimidation. Threatening a federal officer. Those charges would be added to the indictment. Each one carries additional prison time. I don't hesitate. I tell him yes. My daughters deserve to know their father fought to keep them safe. That threats against children carry real consequences. That bad people don't get away with scaring little girls just because they wear a badge. Burnett makes notes. He asks specific questions about what the agent said, how he tapped their faces in the photo, the way he memorized our address out loud. I answer each question even though repeating it makes my hands shake. He thanks me for my courage. He promises the agent will face maximum consequences. That evening, Aaliyah corners me in the hallway. She's been watching me carefully all week, sensing there's more to the story than I've told her. She asks directly what I'm avoiding, what part of the incident I haven't explained. I pull up the incident report on my laptop. I show her the section about the family photo, the specific threats the agent made about our daughters. I watch her face change as she reads. Concern shifts to fear. Fear transforms into protective anger that matches my own. She asks if he knows where we live. I tell her he memorized our address. He made sure I heard him repeat it. That's when she stops reading and looks at me. Her eyes are fierce. She asks what we're going to do about it. We sit at the kitchen table and make the decision together. Federal protection monitoring for our home address. I call Maynard and explain the situation. She approves the request immediately. The documented threats justify protective measures. 2 agents arrive the next morning with equipment cases. They install security cameras at every entrance, motion sensors on the windows, direct alarm connection to federal response teams. They provide emergency contact protocols, numbers to call if we see anything suspicious, instructions for the girls about stranger danger. Our safe place becomes somewhere that requires watching. The agents work efficiently. They explain each system as they install it. Aaliyah follows them around asking questions. I watch from the living room window. Our neighbors probably wonder why federal agents are securing our house. Safia comes home from the school while the installation is finishing. She drops her backpack and stares at the cameras. Her voice is small and scared when she asks why men are putting cameras around our house. I kneel down to her level. I explain that my work sometimes involves people who make bad choices. We're being extra careful to keep everyone safe. It's just a thing we do to be smart. Nothing for her to worry about. But I see in her eyes that she understands more than I want her to. She's 12. She's experienced kids at the school making comments about her headscarf. She knows the world has people who don't like us just for being Muslim. She asks if the bad person from my work knows where we live. I pause too long before answering. That pause tells her everything. I say we're being careful, and that's what matters. The cameras will help us stay safe. She nods but doesn't look convinced. Her little sister runs past chasing the cat, unaware that anything is wrong, unaware that our home now needs federal protection. Safia watches the agents finish their work. She doesn't ask more questions. But when they leave, she stays close to me for the rest of the evening. Closer than usual. Like she needs to make sure I'm really here and really safe. Maynard calls 3 days after the security camera installation. Her voice carries an energy I haven't heard before. She tells me the agent was arrested this morning at his home. Federal marshals showed up at 6 in the morning with news cameras filming everything. 4 federal counts. Civil rights violations under color of law. Assault on a federal officer. Theft of government property. Threatening a federal official and their family. Each charge carries serious prison time. She walks me through the maximum sentences. 5 years for the civil rights violations. 3 years for the assault. 2 years for the theft. 5 more years for the threats against my family. The numbers add up to potential decades behind bars. I ask if the media coverage was deliberate. She confirms they tipped off local news stations because public accountability matters when someone commits public humiliation. The same neighbors who might have watched him come home from work every day got to see federal marshals walk him out in handcuffs. His lawyer contacts Burnett within hours of the arrest. Maynard tells me this during the same call. The defense attorney is already pushing for a plea deal, trying to avoid trial and the maximum sentences stacking up. Burnett's response is firm. No deals until the investigation finishes completely. More charges might get added as evidence surfaces. The lawyer argues his client has a family and a clean record before this incident. Burnett reminds him that his client threatened my family and destroyed religious items while wearing a federal badge. Clean records don't erase what happened in that glass room. I return to the office 4 days later. Colleagues look at me differently now. Their faces show careful sympathy mixed with something else. Maybe respect. Maybe discomfort. They know what happened because the case is all over the news. A Muslim federal agent harassed at an airport he was auditing. The story writes itself. People stop by my desk offering support, telling me I'm brave for coming forward, thanking me for my service. Each conversation makes me feel more fragile than the last. Maynard pulls me into her office before lunch. She assigns me to desk work reviewing discrimination complaints from other locations. Nothing that requires field operations or undercover work. She understands I need distance from airports right now. Need time to process what happened before I can walk through another security checkpoint. The complaints pile up on my desk. Muslim travelers describing excessive screening, Hispanic families separated during searches, Black passengers pulled aside while white travelers passed through freely. Each report follows familiar patterns. Each one represents someone who felt violated and powerless. I read through them with new understanding. Before the incident, I approached these complaints as an investigator documenting violations. Now I read them as someone who lived through it, who knows exactly how it feels to be singled out and humiliated while crowds watch. 3 more Muslim travelers contact the office within a week of the agent's arrest. News coverage of the criminal charges brings them forward. Each one describes experiences at the same airport. A woman in hijab pulled into secondary screening every single time she flies. Agents making comments about her headscarf, asking why she covers her hair, suggesting she might be hiding something. A man with a beard detained for 2 hours while they searched his luggage item by item. Agents laughing about his prayer rug, making jokes about terrorists, acting like his religious items were suspicious rather than sacred. A college student questioned about his mosque attendance, asked to explain his faith. Treated like practicing Islam makes him dangerous. Their testimonies span 18 months. The pattern becomes impossible to ignore. This wasn't one bad agent having one bad day. This was systematic harassment happening repeatedly over time. Maynard reviews their statements with the full investigation team. She calls me into the conference room where evidence covers every wall. Photos of destroyed religious items, transcripts of witness interviews, screening records showing Muslim travelers flagged at 3 times the normal rate. The data tells a clear story. The airport's security culture tolerated and maybe encouraged religious discrimination. My incident was just the most extreme example that finally got caught on camera. The investigation expands within days. What started as individual misconduct charges against one agent becomes a full audit of airport security operations. Maynard assembles a team of 6 investigators. They request screening records going back 2 years. Interview schedules for every TSA agent who worked during the relevant period. Training materials and policy documents. Supervisor evaluation reports. Everything that might reveal whether leadership knew about the discrimination and chose to ignore it. I watch the scope grow from my desk where I'm reviewing complaints. The case transforms from holding one person accountable to examining an entire system. Whether supervisors tolerated discriminatory practices, whether training programs addressed bias prevention, whether complaint procedures existed and functioned properly. Each question leads to more questions. Each answer reveals deeper problems. Chandler calls my office line 2 weeks after the agent's arrest. Her voice sounds professional but strained. She introduces herself as the airport security director, explains she was hired 6 months ago specifically to reform security operations. The airport had problems before she arrived, complaints about screening procedures, concerns about staff training. She thought she was making progress, implementing new policies, updating training programs. Then my incident happened and forced everything into the open. She admits she didn't realize how bad the discrimination problem was. Didn't know agents were destroying religious items and threatening travelers. The systems she put in place weren't working. The reforms she implemented weren't reaching the screening floor where agents interact with passengers. She asks if I'm willing to meet, talk about what happened, help her understand what went wrong so she can fix it properly this time. I tell her I'll think about it. Need to talk with Maynard first. Make sure meeting with her doesn't interfere with the investigation. She understands, gives me her direct number, says to call whenever I'm ready. Maynard approves the meeting after reviewing Chandler's background. She confirms Chandler was brought in to reform operations, has a clean record, seems genuinely committed to fixing problems rather than covering them up. We schedule the meeting at a federal building downtown, not at the airport. I'm not ready to go back there yet. Not ready to walk through those security checkpoints or past that glass room where everything happened. The federal building feels neutral. Safe. Chandler arrives exactly on time carrying a leather folder thick with documents. She shakes my hand, thanks me for agreeing to meet. Her face shows genuine concern mixed with exhaustion. We sit across from each other in a small conference room. She opens the folder and spreads out papers. A comprehensive reform plan covering every aspect of security operations. First item is terminating Rutledge, the supervisor who walked away when my screening started, who ignored complaints before mine, who created a culture where agents felt free to harass travelers without consequences. His firing sends a message that supervisory negligence carries real consequences. Second item restructures screening protocols. New procedures for secondary screening. Requirements for supervisor approval before extended detentions. Mandatory documentation of every search. Body cameras for all agents to record interactions. Third item implements independent oversight for discrimination complaints. A direct reporting system that bypasses the chain of command. External review of every complaint. Binding arbitration for serious violations. Chandler walks me through each reform. Her commitment sounds genuine. She's done her homework, identified specific failures and designed specific solutions. But I've seen reform plans before. Watched institutions promise change and then quietly return to old habits once attention fades. I tell her reform plans mean nothing without enforcement, without consequences for violations, without accountability structures that survive leadership changes. She nods, says she expected that response, pulls out another document, a formal agreement to quarterly audits by the Inspector General's office, binding arbitration for discrimination complaints with independent arbitrators, financial penalties for policy violations. Everything in writing, everything enforceable. Not just promises, but actual mechanisms to ensure compliance. I read through the agreement carefully. The language is specific. The consequences are clear. This isn't just good intentions. This is accountability with teeth. I tell her I'm impressed, but I'll need Maynard to review everything before I endorse any reforms. She agrees immediately. Says she wants the Inspector General's approval because that carries weight. Shows the reforms are real and not just public relations. A civil rights attorney named Fitzpatrick contacts me the following week. His voicemail explains he specializes in constitutional violations and discrimination cases. He's followed news coverage of my case. Believes I have strong grounds for a civil lawsuit against the TSA and the airport. Constitutional violations. Assault. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Failure to supervise. The damages could be significant. Not just for my trauma, but for my family's ongoing fear. The security measures we needed. The therapy my daughters require. He wants to discuss representation. I listened to the voicemail twice before calling him back. I'm not sure about litigation. My goal was always systemic reform. Holding individuals accountable. Making sure this doesn't happen to other Muslim travelers. A lawsuit feels like it's about money. About personal compensation rather than institutional change. But Fitzpatrick argues something different when I call him back. He explains that financial consequences drive institutional change more effectively than policy recommendations. Airports and federal agencies respond to money. To insurance premiums increasing. To budget impacts from settlements. A successful lawsuit creates financial incentive for reform that policy changes alone can't match. He's not wrong. I've seen institutions ignore recommendations and then scramble to change after losing lawsuits. Money talks louder than reports. Aaliyah asks about the attorney call that evening. I explain Fitzpatrick's argument about financial consequences driving change. She listens quietly while I work through my hesitation about litigation. When I finish, she asks a simple question. What do our daughters learn if I don't pursue every available option for justice? If I stop at criminal charges and policy reforms, but don't use civil courts? She points out that modeling advocacy means showing them all the ways to fight back. Criminal justice, administrative reform, civil litigation. Each channel serves a purpose. Each one holds different people accountable in different ways. She's right. Fighting back isn't just acceptable. It's necessary. And fighting back means using every tool available. Not just the comfortable ones. Not just the ones that feel noble. All of them. I call Fitzpatrick back the next morning. Tell him I want to pursue the civil case. He sounds pleased but not surprised. Says he'll start drafting the complaint immediately. We schedule a meeting to review everything before filing. He warns me the process will take time. Civil cases move slowly. But he's confident about the outcome. The evidence is overwhelming. The violations are clear. This is the kind of case that should settle before trial. That should result in significant damages and binding reform agreements. I thank him and hang up. Then I sit at my desk thinking about what comes next. Criminal charges, federal investigation, civil lawsuit, each one a different path toward the same goal. Making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. Fitzpatrick sends over the draft complaint 3 days later. I read through 50 pages of legal language that transforms my trauma into formal allegations. Religious discrimination under Title VII, assault and battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, failure to supervise and train employees. Each section lists specific actions with timestamps from my body camera footage, the prayer cap held up like a trophy, the Quran pages torn and scattered, the family photo threats, the physical restraint that left marks on my wrists for days. Every violation documented in clinical legal terms that somehow make the experience feel both more real and more distant. The damages section requests compensation for my psychological treatment, my family's therapy costs, the security measures we needed at home, and punitive damages meant to punish the institutional failures that let this happen. Fitzpatrick includes a cover note explaining the complaint will be filed publicly, creating permanent record of what occurred, and forcing the defendants to respond in court documents anyone can read. I sign the authorization form and send it back. The lawsuit gets filed the following morning. The agent's defense attorney releases a statement to media outlets that same afternoon. I read it on my phone while sitting in my office, each sentence making my jaw tighter. The statement claims I'm a trained federal investigator who should have identified myself immediately upon being selected for secondary screening. It argues the agent was following standard security protocols when screening an uncooperative passenger who refused to provide proper identification. The victim-blaming strategy is obvious and enraging because it suggests federal investigators deserve harassment if they don't announce their authority before testing compliance systems. The statement ignores that compliance audits only work when agents don't know they're being evaluated. That announcing my federal credentials would have defeated the entire purpose of testing whether this airport discriminates against Muslim travelers. The defense attorney frames my professional role as somehow making the religious harassment acceptable, as if being an investigator means I forfeit civil rights protections when doing my job. My phone rings within an hour. Burnett's voice comes through tight with anger before I even finish saying hello. He tells me he just read the defense statement and it actually helps our case more than hurts it. I ask how victim blaming could possibly benefit us. Burnett explains the statement demonstrates the agent's complete lack of remorse and his belief that his actions were justified. The argument that investigators must identify themselves before testing for discrimination reveals a basic misunderstanding of how compliance audits work and why they're necessary. Any jury will understand that undercover operations require investigators to conceal their identity, that testing for discrimination means experiencing the discrimination firsthand. The defense attorney just admitted on the record that his client believes the harassment was appropriate, which makes proving malicious intent much easier. Burnett sounds almost pleased as he explains how the statement will backfire during trial, how juries respond poorly to defendants who blame victims for their own mistreatment. I thank him for the perspective, but the anger still sits heavy in my chest. Media coverage of the case explodes over the next week. I avoid most of it, but Aliyah shows me headlines that reveal the predictable political divide. Some outlets defend the agent as a patriot protecting America from potential threats, framing the incident as aggressive security screening rather than religious harassment. Other outlets condemn the treatment as textbook discrimination and civil rights violations. Comment sections fill with strangers debating whether I deserved what happened, whether Muslim travelers should expect extra scrutiny, whether federal investigators have any right to test airport security without announcing themselves. I stop reading after the first few articles because engaging with people who think destroying someone's holy book is acceptable security procedure serves no purpose. The legal proceedings will determine facts and consequences. Public opinion on social media doesn't change what happened in that glass room or what the law requires. Maynard calls the following week with preliminary audit findings. Her team analyzed 6 months of screening records from the airport, comparing selection rates across different passenger demographics. The data shows Muslim travelers, identified by appearance markers like beards, head coverings, and Middle Eastern features, were screened at 3 times the rate of other passengers despite identical security risk profiles. No difference in travel patterns, ticket purchase timing, or behavior that would justify disparate treatment. Just appearance-based selection that created a pattern of discrimination so clear it shows up in raw statistics. The preliminary report includes charts showing the screening rate disparity, witness statements from Muslim travelers describing similar harassment, and documentation of complaints that supervisors ignored or actively discouraged. The evidence supports charges of systemic discrimination beyond just my individual experience, revealing an institutional problem rather than one rogue agent's misconduct. Supervisor Rutledge gets officially terminated 2 days after the preliminary audit release. Maynard forwards me the termination letter that lists specific failures in his supervisory duties. He ignored multiple complaints about the agent's behavior toward Muslim travelers over 18 months. He actively discouraged passengers from filing discrimination reports, telling them security screening decisions were not subject to complaint procedures. He witnessed the beginning of my harassment and walked away instead of intervening or calling for oversight. The termination letter states his negligence created an environment where agents felt free to violate civil rights without consequences, that his failure to supervise enabled the discriminatory culture documented in the audit. His firing sends a message that supervisory negligence carries real consequences, though I wish accountability hadn't required my traumatic experience to trigger action. The system shouldn't need a federal investigator to get assaulted before addressing patterns visible in complaint records and screening data. The 3 TSA colleagues who clapped during the Quran destruction receive official reprimands and mandatory bias training, but keep their jobs pending completion of remedial programs. Maynard emails me the disciplinary letters explaining they participated in religious desecration while on duty, that their applause encouraged and validated the primary agent's misconduct. The relatively light consequences frustrate me because active participation in destroying someone's holy book deserves more than training sessions. But Maynard calls to explain federal employment protections limit disciplinary options without criminal charges. The colleagues didn't personally touch me or my belongings, which makes proving assault difficult. Their participation was verbal and symbolic rather than physical, creating legal complications for termination. The bias training includes modules on religious accommodation, discrimination recognition, and bystander intervention protocols. Maynard promises to monitor their completion and performance going forward, but I know training only works if people actually want to change. Agent Shepard, one of the colleagues who clapped, requests a meeting through Maynard to apologize directly. The request comes in a formal email asking if I'd be willing to meet in a federal building with Maynard present as a witness. I'm skeptical about her motives, wondering if the apology is genuine remorse or strategic positioning to minimize her own consequences. But I agree to meet because I'm curious whether her regret is real or performed, whether she actually understands what she participated in, or just wants to check a box that might help her keep her job. We schedule the meeting for the following Tuesday in a conference room at the federal building downtown. Maynard confirms she'll attend to document the conversation and ensure the meeting stays appropriate. Shepard arrives exactly on time, looking nervous and uncomfortable. She's younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with her TSA uniform pressed and her hair pulled back tight. She sits across from me with Maynard positioned at the end of the table taking notes. Her apology comes out halting and tearful, words catching in her throat as she explains she was caught up in the moment and didn't think about the religious significance of what she was witnessing. She describes seeing the other agents react and just following along, clapping because everyone else was clapping, not processing that she was celebrating the destruction of someone's holy book. Her regret seems genuine based on the tears and the way her hands shake while she talks. But I tell her directly that ignorance doesn't excuse participating in desecration. That clapping while someone's religious text is destroyed reveals a failure of basic human decency, regardless of religious education. She nods and wipes her eyes, saying she knows that now, that she's been thinking about it every day since watching me get dragged into that room. I ask Shepard what she'll do differently now, because apologies mean nothing without changed behavior. She describes volunteering to lead the mandatory bias training program, working with the training department to develop better materials that actually address discrimination, rather than just checking compliance boxes. She talks about creating a peer intervention protocol, where agents commit to stopping discrimination they witness, establishing clear steps for reporting and documenting concerns, even when supervisors discourage complaints. She wants to build a system where what happened to me becomes impossible, because multiple people would intervene before it escalated. Her concrete actions toward change matter more than her tears. I tell her I appreciate the specific commitments, but I'll be watching to see if her reform efforts last beyond her own consequences, whether she stays committed when the attention fades and the disciplinary process concludes. She promises she will, that this changed how she sees her job and her responsibility to travelers. Time will show if she means it. 2 weeks after Shepard's apology, Hadrian calls with the trial schedule. The agent's court date is set for 4 months out, which gives the prosecution team enough time to organize everything they've collected. Body camera footage from my jacket button shows every moment in that glass room. Witness statements from travelers who watched through the open door. Pattern evidence from the 18 months of complaints that Supervisor Rutledge ignored. Hadrian walks me through what they're building, his voice confident in a way that makes me believe this case won't drag on forever. He says the evidence is so clear that the agent's lawyer will probably push for a plea deal, rather than face a jury watching footage of him destroying someone's holy book while colleagues clapped. That would spare me from sitting in a witness box describing the worst moments in detail, from explaining to strangers what he said about my daughters while tapping their faces in that photo. I tell Hadrian I'm ready to testify if needed, but the relief I feel knowing I might not have to is bigger than I want to admit. Fitzpatrick calls 3 days later about the civil lawsuit moving forward. He's filed discovery requests for every airport security record from the past 2 years, every discrimination complaint filed or discouraged, every training material used to teach agents how to screen passengers. The airport's insurance company reached out about settlement talks within a week of receiving those requests, which tells Fitzpatrick they know what those records will show. They'd rather pay damages than have their discriminatory practices laid out in a public trial where reporters can write about every detail. The insurance lawyer mentioned numbers that would cover therapy for my family, compensation for the trauma, maybe college funds for my daughters. But Fitzpatrick warns me that early settlement offers usually come with confidentiality agreements that bury everything under legal silence. I tell Fitzpatrick I'm not interested in taking money to stay quiet about what happened. If we settle, it needs to include public acknowledgement that I was subjected to unconstitutional religious discrimination. It needs to include binding commitments to the reforms Chandler proposed, not just policy recommendations that fade when attention moves elsewhere. Fitzpatrick says he'll negotiate those terms, that financial damages matter less than accountability that can't be hidden behind confidentiality clauses. He sounds like he agrees with me, like he's handled cases where victims took settlements and regretted watching institutions continue hurting others because no one could talk about what happened. I want the money to help my family recover, but I want the public acknowledgement more. Aaliyah suggests family therapy the following week, watching how Safia jumps at loud noises and how our younger daughter checks the locks on our doors 3 times before bed. The fear and constant watching didn't exist before they learned about the threats against them. The therapist we find specializes in helping families process trauma when parents work dangerous jobs. She meets with all 4 of us in a comfortable office with soft chairs and art supplies scattered on a low table. She helps the girls understand that bad people exist, but so do systems of justice and protection. That their father's work matters because it holds bad people responsible for their actions. Safia asks if the bad man can still hurt us, and the therapist explains about prison and supervised release and how the legal system works to keep families safe. Our younger daughter draws a picture of our house surrounded by tall walls, which the therapist says is normal. That feeling the need for protection makes sense after learning someone threatened your family. Aaliyah holds my hand through the whole session, and I realize we're all carrying pieces of what happened in that glass room. 3 months pass with weekly therapy sessions and slow healing. Maynard calls to ask if I'm ready to return to fieldwork for the IG office. She's careful with the question, making it clear there's no pressure, that desk work is available as long as I need it. But I tell her I'm ready because sitting in an office reviewing other people's reports isn't why I became an investigator. She assigns me to audit a different airport with no discrimination complaints in its file, a smaller facility where security runs smoothly according to passenger feedback. It's a low-stress assignment designed to rebuild my confidence in the work's purpose, to remind me that most airports can maintain security without religious profiling. The new audit goes exactly how it should have gone at the first airport. I arrive dressed the same way, full beard and prayer cap, carrying a bag with religious items. The TSA agents screen me professionally, their questions focused on travel plans and luggage contents rather than my appearance. One agent asks about my prayer rug when it shows up on the scanner, but his tone is curious rather than hostile. He handles it carefully when checking the bag's contents, treating it like what it is instead of something suspicious. The whole screening takes 12 minutes and I move through security without harassment or excessive touching or colleagues gathering to watch. The contrast with my earlier experience feels stark, showing me that discrimination isn't built into airport security procedures. Airports can protect travelers without profiling them when leadership actually prioritizes civil rights alongside safety measures. Hadrian calls 2 weeks after my smooth audit with news about the criminal case. The agent accepted a plea deal rather than face trial with all that body camera footage. He pleaded guilty to civil rights violations and assault on a federal officer. The sentence includes 2 years in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release after he gets out, mandatory bias counseling that he has to complete and prove completion, and permanent prohibition from working in security or law enforcement ever again. Hadrian walks me through each piece, explaining how the prohibition ensures he can never use authority to harm people he's supposed to protect. The guilty plea means he formally admitted what he did, that it's in court records forever, that he can't claim innocence or blame me for testing airport compliance. The 2-year prison sentence feels too short when I think about the trauma he inflicted, about my daughters checking locks and Aaliyah's nightmares, and the way I still tense up going through airport security, even at facilities with professional staff. But it also feels significant because it's real consequences. Actual time locked away. Proof that violating someone's civil rights while wearing a federal badge carries penalties beyond just losing your job. I tell Hadrian I accept the plea deal because of the formal admission of guilt and the permanent ban from security work. Those pieces matter more than arguing for a longer sentence that might not happen if a jury decided differently than we expect. The civil lawsuit settles 2 weeks after the criminal plea, which Fitzpatrick says is common timing. The airport and TSA agree to pay $450,000 in damages and implement every reform from Chandler's plan. But more important than the money is the public acknowledgement written into the settlement agreement. It states clearly that I was subjected to unconstitutional religious discrimination, that institutional failures enabled the harassment, that supervisory negligence created an environment where agents felt free to violate civil rights. The settlement terms include independent oversight of screening practices, mandatory body cameras that can't be turned off during passenger interactions, enhanced bias training with regular testing, and the new discrimination reporting system that bypasses supervisors who might discourage complaints. Fitzpatrick says the binding nature of these reforms means they can't quietly fade when media attention moves on, that the airport faces penalties if audits show they're not maintaining the changes. Maynard organizes a press conference at the federal building downtown. The airport director and TSA regional administrator stand at a podium with microphones, reading prepared statements that publicly apologize for what happened to me. They announce the reforms with specific details about oversight committees and camera requirements and training hours. They acknowledge that systematic discrimination existed at their facility, that Muslim travelers were profiled at 3 times the rate of other passengers despite identical security risk factors. Maynard asks me to stand beside them during the announcements, visible proof that the victim they're apologizing to is real and present. Standing there while they read their acknowledgement of wrongdoing feels like something bigger than personal vindication. Every Muslim traveler who experienced profiling at that airport, who filed complaints that Rutledge dismissed, who walked through security wondering if their appearance would trigger harassment, they're being acknowledged too. The reforms won't undo what happened, but they might prevent the next person from enduring what I did in that glass room. The settlement check arrives 3 weeks later, larger than I expected, but somehow feeling smaller than the damage caused. I deposit it at the bank that afternoon and immediately set up college accounts for both daughters, dividing most of the money between them so their futures can benefit from what their father endured. The rest goes to the Civil Rights Defense Fund, an organization that fights religious discrimination cases across the country, because other families shouldn't need federal investigator credentials to get justice when airports profile them. Aaliyah watches me complete the transfers online and squeezes my shoulder, understanding that keeping the money would feel like accepting payment for trauma, instead of transforming it into something that protects others. 6 months pass before I feel ready to return to that airport. Chandler calls with an invitation to tour the facility and observe the reforms in action, her voice careful because she knows what she's asking. I agree, but tell her Aaliyah needs to come with me, that walking back into the building where I was violated requires someone who understands why my hands shake when I book the flight. We drive there on a Tuesday morning when traffic is light and Aaliyah holds my hand in the parking garage while I breathe through the memories flooding back. The security checkpoint looks different already. New signs about passenger rights posted in multiple languages, camera notifications everywhere, agents wearing updated badges with their names clearly visible. We move through the line together, and I watch a woman in hijab get screened with the same quick professionalism as the businessman ahead of her. No extra questions or suspicious looks, just efficient security that treats everyone the same. Chandler meets us past security and guides us through the terminal, pointing out training posters and the new discrimination reporting stations where passengers can file complaints directly to federal oversight without going through supervisors who might dismiss them. She walks us toward the area where the screening rooms are located, and my chest tightens as we get closer. But then she opens a door and I stop breathing for different reasons. The glass walls are still there, but everything inside has changed completely. Prayer rugs face east on the floor, meditation cushions line one wall, religious texts from multiple faiths sit on shelves, and soft lighting replaces the harsh fluorescence that used to illuminate humiliation. Chandler explains they deliberately transformed this space from a place of violation into a place of respect, that every Muslim traveler who uses this room for prayer will be reclaiming what was taken from me. I walk inside and kneel on one of the prayer rugs, touching the soft fabric where pages of my Quran once scattered like snow, and unexpected tears come because this space that held so much cruelty now offers dignity to travelers who need it. 3 TSA agents wait outside when we emerge, all of them completing the enhanced bias training and now serving as peer monitors who watch for discrimination and intervene when they see problems developing. They thank me for coming forward, explaining that the reforms clarified expectations and gave them tools to stop harassment instead of just witnessing it. One agent admits she stood in that crowd outside the glass room during my screening, that she knew something was wrong, but didn't know how to intervene without risking her own job, and now the peer monitor system protects agents who report discrimination instead of punishing them. Their gratitude feels strange because I never intended to be brave. I was just doing my job and documenting violations. But I understand they're thanking me for creating a workplace where doing the right thing is possible instead of dangerous. That evening, Safia climbs into my lap during dinner and asks if the bad man who scared us is still in jail. I tell her yes. He's serving his sentence and learning that hurting people has real consequences that last. She's quiet for a moment, processing, then looks up at me with serious eyes and says she's proud of me for being brave even when I was scared. My throat tightens because I realize my daughters watched their father face something terrible and fight back through legal channels instead of staying silent, and they learned that standing up to wrong treatment matters even when it's hard and frightening. Aaliyah meets my eyes across the table, and I see her thinking the same thing, that our girls are growing up understanding justice isn't automatic, but something you have to pursue and demand. 3 weeks later, Maynard calls me into her office at the federal building downtown. The Inspector General himself is there, along with several senior investigators I recognize from major cases. They present me with a commendation for service under extreme circumstances, recognizing that I maintained professional documentation and composure while enduring severe harassment that would have broken most people. Maynard reads the citation aloud, and her voice catches when she describes the body camera footage showing me continuing to document violations, even while the agent destroyed my religious items and threatened my family. The ceremony feels overwhelming because these colleagues understand exactly what compliance audits cost. How wearing a target on your appearance to test institutional discrimination requires enduring the very violations you're investigating. The commendation goes in a frame at home where my daughters can see it. Physical proof that their father's work protecting civil rights matters enough for official recognition. A year passes with therapy and healing and slowly rebuilding the sense of safety that was shattered. The IG office asks me to lead bias training for new investigators, teaching them how to document discrimination while managing their own emotional responses to harassment. I stand in front of a classroom of agents who look impossibly young and share my experience, not to dwell on being a victim, but to prepare them for the reality that fighting injustice sometimes requires enduring it first. I show them the body camera footage with clinical detachment, explaining documentation techniques and evidence preservation, while my hands shake slightly holding the remote. They ask hard questions about maintaining objectivity during personal attacks, and I'm honest that objectivity is a goal not always achievable, that sometimes you document through tears and process trauma later. But I also tell them their work creates change that outlasts individual pain, that hundreds of travelers benefit from reforms purchased with one person's suffering, and that knowledge makes the cost bearable. My family travels without fear now. The security cameras removed from our home because the threat has passed, and the man who made it sits in federal prison. We fly to visit Aaliyah's parents and move through airport security smoothly, my daughters watching agents treat their father with professional courtesy instead of suspicion. They see the reforms their father's experience created, the prayer spaces and clear reporting systems and agents who intervene when they witness problems. The trauma changed me in ways I'm still discovering, nightmares that wake me sweating and hypervigilance that makes crowded spaces difficult, but it also changed an entire airport's culture, and that transformation makes the suffering feel worthwhile. I know hundreds of Muslim travelers will be treated with dignity because I refused to stay silent when I was violated, and that knowledge helps me breathe through the hard moments when memories overwhelm present safety.